I'm not intimidated by threats from a housewife with no job and no family like you, she sneered. That's right, you're powerless, just like the trash you can't even handle. I get it now, she continued with a smirk. I'm moving out of this house. Good luck, homeless lady. Her taunting voice echoed in my ears. I stood there, trying to process her words. This is a great chance for Frank to leave too, she added, turning to him. Come on, let's pack up your stuff and get out. Together, they marched to Frank's room, instructing him to gather his things. Originally, I had only planned to leave, but I never imagined Frank would be thrown out alongside me. My name is Amber, 27 years old, a housewife. I recently married a man named Tom, who is 30, 3 years older than me. At first, I thought he was mature, calm, and had an old soul. He often spoke fondly of his mother, which led me to believe he was a good man who valued his family. But it wasn't until after we were married that I discovered my husband's true nature. On our wedding day, as we exchanged vows, my mother-in-law was all smiles and kind words. I genuinely believed we would have a happy marriage. Shortly after, Tom suggested we move in with his mother, explaining that his father had passed away a few years ago and that he wanted to be close to her. Trusting him and thinking his mother was someone I could rely on, I agreed to the arrangement. But as soon as we were married, everything changed. Both my husband and mother-in-law revealed their true colors. Amber, hurry up and bring me some tea, and clean the bathroom and toilet. Now, my mother-in-law's once gentle voice became sharp and commanding as she barked orders at me. Was she trying to intimidate me, or was this her way of asserting dominance because of her age? She would constantly call out to me, her voice booming through the house, making me do all sorts of chores. But the most shocking revelation was discovering a man I didn't know in the kitchen one morning. I froze, not knowing what to do. Noticing my confusion, he introduced himself. I'm Frank, Tom's younger brother. I had never been told that Tom had a brother, let alone that we would be living with him. It was a startling surprise. Frank was the same age as me minus 27. I approached my mother-in-law, asking her why she hadn't mentioned him before. Oh, you mean Frank? Don't worry about him. He's just a recluse, she responded dismissively. I was stunned. How could she be so indifferent toward her own son? Calling him a ghost. She seemed content with just having Tom around, dismissing Frank as nothing more than a useless hermit who only left the house for grocery shopping. Her words left me disillusioned, shocked at how drastically she had changed since we got married. It was heartbreaking to see a mother discriminate against her own children. As an only child with no siblings to compare myself to, I couldn't fathom being treated this way by my own mother. My parents had already passed away, and I often envied those who still had their families. I longed for parents and children to at least get along. When Tom returned from work, I asked him about Frank, hoping that maybe there was more to their relationship. Just ignore him, Tom replied coldly. Pretend he doesn't exist. He won't bother you. His dismissive tone crushed me. How could he be so heartless, referring to his own brother as if he were nothing? My idealized image of Tom shattered, revealing a man with no real family bonds, a mere mama's boy. After finishing my chores, I went upstairs, regret washing over me. As I turned the corner, I bumped into Frank on his way to the bathroom. You married my brother, didn't you? Frank asked quietly. Yeah, I did, I replied, my voice heavy with uncertainty. I'm sorry, he said, his eyes filled with a sadness I didn't yet understand. It's nothing, but I won't say anything bad. You better get out of here. What? I asked, startled. I'm sorry, but you should consider getting a divorce, Frank continued, his tone serious. His words stung, leaving me confused and a bit offended. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had married my husband because I loved him, and here was his brother, someone I barely knew, suggesting I end our marriage after just one day. It felt surreal. It's none of your business, I retorted. I can handle it. I'm a competitive person. Frank sighed. I'm sorry about that, he said, bowing his head. I'm also sorry for my outburst. I stared at him, taken aback. Just moments ago, I thought he was completely out of line, but now, seeing him apologize so sincerely, I wasn't sure what to think. Maybe he was genuinely trying to warn me, trying to be kind in his own way. As I was processing his words, Frank excused himself and retreated to his room. My husband and mother-in-law had always referred to him as a reclusive oddball, someone they barely acknowledged. But I found myself seeing him differently. He seemed like a decent person, polite even, nothing like the way they described him. The next morning, as I was setting the table for breakfast, Frank came downstairs to grab a drink. "Good morning, Frank," I greeted him with a smile. "Why don't you join us for breakfast?" "Good morning, Amber. Thank you for asking," he replied, but his glance quickly shifted to his mother. "Amber, I'm not eating breakfast with that thing. Just serve the food." My mother-in-law snapped, her tone icy. Frank gave me a brief, apologetic look before quickly retreating to his room. I wanted to apologize for my harsh words the previous day, but the opportunity slipped away. "Hey, just stick to doing the housework, okay? Don't do anything unnecessary," my mother-in-law barked at me, her glare fierce. I was stunned by her hostility. No matter how much she disliked me, I never expected to be treated this way. Even worse was how my husband's attitude had shifted overnight. "What's for lunch today?" he demanded later that day. "Curry," I replied hesitantly. "You should have told me earlier. I had curry for lunch too," he snapped. "How is that my fault?" I thought, but I kept my mouth shut. Why didn't he call me to let me know? It seemed absurd. "Hey, you're not apologizing. Who do you think you are? You're here to do the housework. Understand that," he shouted, his voice harsh and commanding. I stood there in shock, unable to respond. It was becoming painfully clear that Tom didn't love me. He just wanted a housekeeper. It was heartbreaking to realize how calm and indifferent he could be while saying such terrible things. They didn't care about me. They just wanted to make their lives more comfortable, using me as a tool to do so. As I watched them laugh and joke in the living room, I felt a growing sense of isolation, knowing I was merely a convenience to them. I walked upstairs, and as soon as I reached the top, the tears I had been holding back began to flow. I couldn't contain them any longer. Suddenly, a hand gently offered me a handkerchief. "I still think you should leave," said a familiar voice. I looked up and saw Frank standing there. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." I wiped my tears hastily, feeling embarrassed. "I'm sorry I used your handkerchief." "No," Frank replied softly. "I gave it to you because I wanted you to use it." He paused, then added, "I heard what my brother and mother said. They're the worst." His words caught me off guard. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Frank sighed and shared something that made my heart sink. He told me that he had been in a similar situation before. Apparently, my husband had once been engaged to another woman, but she ran away just before the wedding because my mother-in-law and husband had treated her the same way they were treating me now. Hearing this, I felt a wave of relief, mixed with despair. It all made sense now. Their kindness before the marriage was just an act, a facade to keep the bride from fleeing. How could I have been so blind? I had trusted them, and now I felt utterly hopeless. But what could I do? I had nowhere else to go. I was just a housewife with no income and no means to leave. My husband and mother-in-law wouldn't even let me get a part-time job, let alone move out and rent a place of my own. I felt trapped, and all I could do was cry. Then Frank spoke again. "If we keep talking here, it'll look suspicious. Let's meet at a coffee shop next time if you'd like." He handed me a piece of paper with his contact information on it. I nodded, slipping the paper into my pocket as he quietly returned to his room. Determined to regain control of my life, I decided that I had to leave this house. My survival had just begun. "I'm going to the city office to take care of some things, and I'll stop by the supermarket on my way back," I told my mother-in-law as I prepared to leave. "Don't even think about leaving any chores undone," she snapped, her eyes narrowing. But I had made sure everything was in perfect order before I left. As I walked at the door, she mumbled something about not accepting it if I was late for dinner. I pretended to agree and headed straight to the coffee shop where Frank and I had agreed to meet. Over coffee, I confided in Frank. I told him about my parents, how they were gone now, and how I couldn't rely on them anymore. I shared that I had canceled the lease on the house I was renting before the marriage and had quit my job, leaving me with nothing. But deep down, I knew I had to find a way out. This was just the beginning, and I was determined to survive. I told Frank that I would have to start my life over from scratch. It's hard to move out of the house under these circumstances, isn't it? The biggest obstacle is the work. I'm tied up with my mother-in-law and husband from early morning until late at night. Frank seemed deep in thought for a moment before asking, "Amber, can you draw?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Ha! What do you mean?" He smiled. "I mean, can you draw? Like art?" "Well, yes," I replied hesitantly. I went to art school before. Really? That's great. Frank's eyes lit up. Just in time. There's a manga artist I know who's looking for an assistant. You can work remotely. But I don't have a computer right now, I said, feeling a bit deflated. No problem, Frank said reassuringly. I'll lend you mine. I have an extra one I'm not using. Really? Thank you so much, I exclaimed, surprised by his generosity. But why do you have an extra computer? What do you do for a living? Frank chuckled softly. It's kind of you to ask. You don't think I'm just a recluse, do you? No, not at all, I said quickly. You're always polite and well-groomed. I never thought that. He nodded. I work from home. I'm actually an engineer. I used to work for a company, but now I run my own business. I was astonished. Really? I had no idea you were a business owner. Yes, Frank continued. It's easier for me to manage things this way since I take on projects independently. We also have a few web designers as employees, but everything is done remotely. So that's why you're home all the time. I mused. But your mother and Tom said you'd just stay home doing nothing. You haven't told them the truth. I don't see any benefit in telling them, he replied calmly. True, I agreed. But if you're such a successful manager, why don't you just leave that house? Frank's expression turned serious. That's a story for another time. Right now, we need to focus on you. Let me introduce you to the manga artist. Without wasting any time, Frank made a phone call, and soon, he had arranged a remote interview for me with the manga artist. The interview was set for Wednesday, a day when my mother-in-law usually had her lessons and would be out with the other participants afterward. I was able to schedule the remote interview during that time, and it seemed to go well. I must have made a good impression because I was hired immediately. Given my situation, they offered to send the necessary documents to Frank's address, ensuring everything remained discreet. With the job secured, the next step was finding a new place to live. I have a friend who works in real estate, Frank said. He can get you a good deal. I couldn't help but wonder who this guy was. He seemed to have endless resources. Thanks to Frank's connections, our search for a new place went smoothly. We quickly signed a lease on a place that fit my needs perfectly. Just when everything seemed to be falling into place, things took a turn. One night, I was awakened by my husband who had just returned home, slightly drunk. Hey, where's dinner? He demanded, shaking me awake. Dinner? It's midnight, I replied groggily. You said you didn't want to eat because you were going out for drinks. Shut up, he snapped. The king comes home, and you won't even get up to greet him. Now you're saying you didn't cook dinner? You're a worthless wife. His words cut deep, igniting a fire in me. Do you have any idea how hard I've been working with your mother for you? I shot back. How dare you act so superior to me? Because you're my wife, he sneered. A wife should support her husband, and your job is to take care of the house. If you can't do that, don't stand against me. A wife who can't do housework is nothing but trash. As he finished speaking, I heard the door creak open. My mother-in-law entered, looking just as displeased. You're nothing but trash, she said coldly. And Frank is trash too. This place is a dump. My husband snickered at her words. Yeah, it's time to take out the oversized trash. What did you just say? I demanded. With a smirk, he opened a drawer and pulled out a document. This is what I mean, he said, holding up divorce papers. You're no good to me anymore. I'm going to find another wife who can actually take care of me. So, I'm divorcing you. Get the hell out of my house. You're disgusting. You think of your wife as nothing more than a slave? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. Is that what you want in a marriage? Someone who acts like a housekeeper? You think I care about what you say? He scoffed. A jobless, parentless woman like you. What are you going to do? You're just garbage. My mother-in-law chimed in, laughing along with him. That's right. You're nothing but trash, and there's nothing you can do about it. Their words were like knives, but I wasn't going to let them break me. I see how you really feel, I said calmly. I'm moving out of this house. I signed the divorce papers and walked away without looking back. I stuffed the papers into my bag and began packing my belongings, all while my husband and mother-in-law watched with smug grins on their faces. So what now? You're homeless, my husband sneered. Not our problem anymore. Good luck out there, homeless lady. And Frank, my mother-in-law added with a wicked smile. He should be out of here too. Time to take out the trash and clear up some space. They began discussing their plans to remodel the house once we were gone. planning to tear down walls and make the place bigger and more comfortable for themselves. It was clear they were already envisioning their lives without us. They headed to Frank's room and ordered him to pack up and leave as well. I hadn't anticipated that Frank would be forced out with me, and a pang of guilt hit me. Had I dragged him into this mess because I couldn't control my emotions during that fight? "I'm sorry, Frank," I said, feeling the weight of responsibility. "This is my fault." But Frank just smiled and shrugged. "Don't worry about it. I realized a while ago that I can't keep living with these people. Besides, I've got other plans now. Maybe it was a good thing we had that fight." His calm demeanor eased my mind slightly. At least he didn't seem too upset about leaving. 2 days later, on Wednesday, when my mother-in-law was out of town, Frank and I called a moving company and left for good. As we finished moving, my mother-in-law called my new place. "Don't worry, we're all gone," I said into the phone. "Frank and I moved out together." "Good," she replied, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "I'm glad I don't have to see you two anymore." She hung up, clearly pleased with herself, but she had no idea what was coming next. Frank and I were planning our revenge, though we kept it to ourselves for now. Moving into a rented house, I managed to settle in and start fresh. Thanks to Frank, I received a substantial settlement from my husband in the divorce. Frank had overheard my husband and mother-in-law's vile comments during our fight and secretly recorded them. Their statements were so damning that they fell under marital and family status harassment. This evidence was crucial in proving that the divorce was entirely due to my husband and mother-in-law's behavior. With that chapter closed, I could finally begin my new life. I managed to secure a substantial alimony settlement, a small victory in my revenge against my ex-husband. Frank's friend, a lawyer, handled the legal side for me. My ex-husband was completely blindsided by the court's decision and accepted the payment without question. Frank's connections were invaluable, and I was incredibly grateful for his help. I decided not to delve into the details any further. A few days later, my ex-mother-in-law began bombarding me with phone calls. It felt like a relentless barrage, as if a demon were knocking at my door. I had intended to block the calls, but in the end, I had no choice but to answer. "Amber, where are you?" she demanded. "I'm not obliged to tell you anything. I'm a complete stranger now," I replied coolly. "Please, don't be like that. I'm calling because, where's Frank?" she asked, sounding desperate. "Why do you want to know where Frank is?" I inquired. "I'm trying to find him, but he's vanished," she said, frustration evident in her voice. "That's too bad. Maybe he doesn't want anything to do with you anymore," I taunted. The speaker crackled with irritation. "Stop being ridiculous. You two moved out together. You must know where he is." "I do know where he is, but I'm not telling you," I said defiantly. "Search for him yourself." "Where are you anyway?" she continued. "You have no home, no job, no place to stay. If you beg, I might let you back, but you'd only be a housekeeper." "Why would I come back to you?" I retorted. "I have a job and a place to live now. There's no reason for me to return." "That's a lie." My ex-husband's voice broke through. He seemed astonished that I had managed to turn my life around so quickly. "I won't correct you," I said. "But if you call me again or show up, I'll call the police." "Wait a minute," he shouted as I hung up the phone. I promptly blocked both his and my mother-in-law's numbers. They were frantic because they had just realized the truth. They had mistakenly believed that my father-in-law had left them a fortune, but it was actually Frank who had been transferring money to his mother's account each month. When Frank was forced out of the house, he stopped the transfers. My mother-in-law thought Frank was just a recluse, not realizing that the money she relied on was gone. Frank had cut ties with his family after being ousted, leaving them in financial ruin. My ex-husband, unable to pay the alimony, was left struggling, and my mother-in-law was now facing financial hardship without the regular transfers. Neither of them deserved my sympathy. They had treated Frank terribly, and now they were facing the consequences. Meanwhile, Frank had purchased a luxury flat in Tokyo and was living comfortably. The truth was, he had been providing for his family all these years to honor a promise to his father. His father, who had passed away, had asked Frank to take care of his mother and brother despite their unkindness. Frank's dedication to his father's wish was both admirable and heartbreaking. He had endured so much to fulfill that promise, only to be mistreated by those he helped. When I met with Frank after moving out, he shared the story of his promise to his father. I agreed with his decision and hoped for his happiness. Despite the painful deception I had faced, Frank's support had been a beacon of hope. A year later, Frank proposed to me, and that's a story for another time. The drastic change in my life after my marriage ended was painful, but I was glad to have found happiness with someone as reliable as Frank. Life had presented its obstacles, but now happiness seemed within reach. Thank you for following my journey until the end. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.
I told you I don't like this food, I said, my frustration clear. You're harassing me by making things I don't enjoy, aren't you? I added, feeling overwhelmed. But your husband likes it, she replied dismissively. Just cook something else right now, I insisted, my patience wearing thin. I had reached my breaking point. The constant yelling and screaming from my mother-in-law when she didn't like something had become unbearable. I wasn't sure if I could handle her sarcasm and criticism for the rest of my life. I had resigned myself to enduring her bullying, but then something happened that changed everything. My name is Ellen. My husband George and I have been married for 3 years, and we were living with my parents at their house. George, often away on business trips, was currently gone, and though I used to feel uneasy without him, had become so busy that I barely noticed his absence. My days were packed from dawn until dusk. I would wake up early to prepare a meal for my father-in-law, who rose with the sun. While he ate, I would clean the house and do the laundry. After he finished, I'd immediately clean up the dishes. Once the household chores were done, I'd rush to my part-time job. When I got home at 5 p.m., I'd cook dinner again, clean the house, and do laundry one more time. By the end of the day, I was exhausted. But the most draining part of my life was the constant bullying from my mother-in-law. Although she didn't work and spent all her time at home, she did no housework. My husband once told me he couldn't even remember what his mother's cooking tasted like, indicating she hadn't done much housework when he was growing up. Despite her inactivity, my mother-in-law had a knack for criticizing everything I did. She was meticulous about the food I prepared and always found fault with the cleanliness of the house. It felt like her hobby to belittle me. Known in the neighborhood as a show-off, she would parade around in ill-fitting jewelry, and though the neighbors would compliment her, they didn't genuinely think she looked good. They were hesitant to upset her, perhaps out of respect for my father-in-law, who was well-liked and involved in the community. He had been an executive at a prominent local company and was still connected with many people from his professional life. Though my father-in-law never imposed his will, my mother-in-law's overbearing nature was often overlooked by the neighbors, who chose not to confront her. Feeling isolated, I had no one to turn to in the neighborhood. However, when my father-in-law fell ill and was diagnosed with advanced cancer, my world shifted. I was grateful for him, who was the complete opposite of my mother-in-law. Despite his illness, his kindness and genuine concern for me stood out starkly against the backdrop of my mother-in-law's cruelty. I knew that our financial stability was largely thanks to my father-in-law's past contributions. To show my gratitude, I tried to take care of him as best as I could. I made sure to keep him engaged with conversations, played cards with him, and prepared easy-to-eat meals to ensure he received the nutrition he needed. He was always appreciative and often expressed his thanks. "Thank you," he would say. "I'm so happy every day because of you." No, I would respond. "I'm just doing what I can." "I'm sorry for the burden my wife has put on you," he would continue. "She doesn't do much around the house." It was clear that my father-in-law was concerned about my mother-in-law's lack of effort. His gentle nature made it hard for him to address her shortcomings directly. Still, it was comforting to know he understood how poorly she treated me. "I'm sorry for leaving everything to you, Ellen," he said. "My wife should be doing a better job. You don't have to force yourself to take care of me." "Please don't say that," I reassured him. "I just want to repay you for everything you've done for me." His eyes welled up with tears as he held my hand and said, "Thank you." But then everything changed. My father-in-law's condition suddenly deteriorated, and he was rushed to the hospital in an emergency. When the ambulance arrived, he was already in a coma. The doctors informed us that his prognosis was uncertain and that we needed to prepare ourselves for the worst. The sudden turn of events left me in a state of panic, struggling to process the gravity of the situation. I couldn't stop crying when I saw my father-in-law, his face etched with pain. I felt a pang of sympathy for my mother-in-law, believing she must be deeply distressed. Asked her how she was coping. However, her response was chillingly unexpected. "I'm sure he'll never recover from this, but at least his inheritance will be enough," she said, her words cold and calculating. Her callousness enraged me. Meanwhile, my father-in-law remained unconscious, though his breathing was steady. I visited him daily, speaking to him as much as I could, hoping that somehow my words might reach him and prompt a response. Yet he showed no signs of waking. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, never came to see him. When I encouraged her to visit, she would respond dismissively. "Don't tell me what to do. I'm too busy every day. Spending time at the hospital is a waste." Whenever I tried to persuade her, she would lash out with harsh comments. She even had the audacity to instruct me, "Hey Ellen, you're bringing clean clothes for him every day, right? Just pretend I did it. Don't make the mistake of saying you did." Her intention was clear. She wanted to appear benevolent while avoiding any actual responsibility. "He'll never wake up, and his inheritance will be mine," she declared. "Don't talk nonsense to people about it." It was evident that my mother-in-law's sole concern was the inheritance, revealing just how little she cared about my father-in-law's well-being. I was so infuriated by my mother-in-law's selfishness that I decided I had to take action. With my father-in-law no longer at home, her bullying had intensified. "Why aren't you starting dinner yet? It's too early for that," she snapped. "I'm heading to the hospital now and will be back soon to cook." "You really piss me off, Ellen," she continued. "I've told you countless times that the old man is only good for leaving me his money. He doesn't need visits or sympathy." Her harsh words about my father-in-law were too much to bear. I wanted to retort but managed to keep my composure. Then I received a call from the hospital with the news I had been hoping for. "Is it true?" asked, heart racing. Thank God. My father-in-law had finally emerged from his coma, and remarkably, his condition had stabilized. I rushed to the hospital with my mother-in-law. As we entered his room, I greeted him warmly. "Welcome back. It's so good to see you." He responded, "Me too. I'm sorry for all the trouble." My father-in-law smiled peacefully at me. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, put on an act of joy and said, "Honey, I've been taking care of you every day." "I see," he replied, noting that his clothes were clean. "You did all this for me?" "Yes, I did everything," she said, looking at me expectantly, as if she wanted me to agree with her performance. Ignored her silent cues and let her leave. It was clear from her expression that she was frustrated with me for not playing along. My father-in-law noticed her irritation, but chose not to comment. "Well, I'm going to go now," my mother-in-law said, her mood sour. "I have some errands to run, so please take care of things here, Ellen." She cast one last annoyed glance at my father-in-law before leaving the room. "Are you okay, Ellen?" he asked, noticing the tension. "Why do you ask?" I responded, puzzled. "My wife's attitude seemed strange," he said. "I thought it was you who took care of me all this time." I realized that he had seen through the pretense. Had been keeping evidence of my mother-in-law's actions, planning to share it when the time was right. I hadn't expected to reveal it so soon. "Well, I'm sorry if this disturbs you," I said, pulling out my voice recorder. "But please listen to this." I played the recording for him, feeling a mix of guilt and relief as he heard my mother-in-law's true voice. I knew my father-in-law would find it painful to hear everything my mother-in-law had said on the recording. Her words were filled with malice and greed. "When my husband dies, I want all the inheritance for myself. I want him to die soon. I don't want to take care of him. It's a waste of time. As I looked at my father-in-law with concern, I was surprised to see him laughing. She's turned into such a greedy woman, hasn't she? He said with a chuckle. I wouldn't give any of my inheritance to someone like that. Despite his laughter, I could sense his deep anger and hurt. A few days later, my father-in-law's condition stabilized, and he was discharged from the hospital. Once home, my mother-in-law made a point of telling him how difficult it had been to care for him every day. My father-in-law listened in silence, not disputing her complaints. Shortly after, my husband returned from his business trip to visit his father. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said as he arrived. "But it's good to see you're doing okay." "Yes, I'm fine," my father-in-law replied. "Thanks to you and Ellen for looking out for me. I'm really glad you're here." My father-in-law seemed genuinely grateful for our support. From then on, my husband and I continued to care for him. Although he made some progress, his health remained fragile. I could see my father-in-law growing weaker each day. The reality of his approaching farewell was becoming clear. My husband and I made a pact to do our utmost for him until we had to say goodbye. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law remained unchanged. She continued to neglect my father-in-law's care, spending her time away from home. It seemed she believed that with my husband's return, she could relax and let us handle everything. The fact that both my father-in-law and husband were home made it harder for her to assert her dominance over me. As my father-in-law's condition deteriorated, he ate less and less. In his final moments, he managed to whisper his last words to us. "Thank you both so much. I've left a will for you to read after I'm gone. I appreciate your care until the end." With those words, his life came to an end. At his funeral, I was deeply moved by the sheer number of people who came to pay their respects. It was clear that my father-in-law had been greatly respected at work and cherished by many. In contrast, my mother-in-law seemed unnervingly lively. She acted as though she was the one who had brought everyone together, and even boasted about taking care of him until the very end. Her lack of tears and her disingenuous display of grief were unsettling. I wanted to confront her about her behavior in front of the attendees, but I refrained from causing a scene at my father-in-law's grave. The funeral went smoothly, and I was relieved that my father-in-law could rest in peace. However, when we returned home, I noticed a drastic shift in my mother-in-law's attitude. My mother-in-law's attitude changed drastically after the funeral. She was visibly exhausted and spoke with a mix of relief and satisfaction. "I'm so tired. Funerals are always so depressing," she said. "But now that I have the inheritance, I can look forward to the rest of my life." It was clear she believed that all of my father-in-law's inheritance was rightfully hers. She seemed in high spirits, making plans for her newfound wealth. That's when my husband presented her with the will. "I'm sorry to change the mood," he said, "but Dad left this will before he passed. I haven't read it yet, but I think it has something to do with the inheritance." "Don't need to see the will. It's all mine," she replied confidently. "Let's just sit down and read it," my husband suggested, trying to calm the situation. When my husband carefully opened the will, my mother-in-law grabbed the paper roughly and began to read. Her expression shifted from confidence to shock as she read the contents. "What? What is this?" she stammered, her face going pale. I took the will from her trembling hands and read it myself. It stated that I was to inherit everything my father-in-law had. It also mentioned that the inheritance was to be used by both me and George as a couple, acknowledging my care for him, while my husband was away. This made perfect sense. My father-in-law's gratitude was evident in his will. "But all of it," my mother-in-law protested, her voice rising in outrage. "This isn't right. How can two strangers get everything?" She accused me of forging the will and made vicious remarks, calling me names and claiming that I must have manipulated my father-in-law. "Hey Mom, stop," my husband finally said, his anger rising. "You've never taken care of Dad. Ellen did. That's why he was so grateful to her. My mother-in-law, now hysterical, began to cry uncontrollably. Please, please, at least leave me the house. I felt a pang of sympathy for my mother-in-law, knowing how hard it must be to lose the home she had lived in for so long. To ease her distress, I decided to offer her a small portion of my inheritance. You can keep the house, I said, looking her directly in the eyes. I understand you're struggling financially, so I'll give you some money as well. But please, don't act like you did before. We're moving out and you'll need to manage on your own. Her reaction shifted dramatically once she learned she would be receiving both the house and some money. Oh, thank God. I was afraid I'd lose the house too, she exclaimed, her mood lightening. If you're leaving, then get out already. With that, she returned to her old, unpleasant self. I was frustrated by how easily I had been manipulated by her false tears, but the thought of no longer living with her outweighed my irritation over the portion of the inheritance I was giving away. A week later, we began our move. We planned to temporarily live in an apartment while searching for a suitable location to build a new house. Thanks to the inheritance from my father-in-law, we would be able to construct a beautiful home. I also wanted to build a small altar in his honor to show my gratitude. I was thrilled at the prospect of a new chapter free from the constant scrutiny of my mother-in-law. On the other hand, she struggled to adjust to her new circumstances. Despite losing her primary residence, she continued her lavish spending habits, living beyond her means. As word of our departure spread, the neighborhood's attitude toward my mother-in-law shifted. The neighbors, once wary of her, began spreading rumors, further isolating her. Her extravagant lifestyle eventually depleted her savings and pension. She had to sell the house she had fought so hard to keep, and now, with no home or job, her current situation is unknown to me. As far as I'm concerned, she is no longer my concern. I have no interest in where she goes or what she does from now on. When I returned home from our week-long honeymoon, strange noises greeted me as I walked through the door. Anxiety set in. I feared that the house might have been broken into while we were away. Did you hear that? Maybe there's someone inside. Should we call the police? I asked my husband, but he dismissed my concerns with a calm, "It's all right." He strode into the house, and I hurried after him, my heart racing. To my relief, it wasn't burglars but my mother-in-law Kelly and my sister-in-law Jo. They were inside, seemingly at ease. I was puzzled, wondering why they were there. Apparently, they had volunteered to look after the house while we were gone, and my husband had given them a key. I had assumed they would leave once we returned. It's getting dark. If you don't go home soon, you'll be out of time, I suggested, hoping they'd take the hint. Instead of leaving, they settled in, commandeering the living room and even taking a shower without asking. I hoped they would depart the next morning, but when I came home from work, they were still there. Unable to tolerate the intrusion any longer, I asked my husband to ask them to leave. His response shocked me. "We all live together now, so if you don't like it, you can leave." He was suggesting that I move out instead. I packed a few essentials and left with just a carry-on. My name is Izzy. I'm a 29-year-old magazine editor. 3 years ago, I met my current husband Alex, through a friend. Prior to him, I had little relationship experience, but I was drawn to his decisive and dependable nature. He expressed his love first and after 3 years of dating proposed. We married, and while searching for a new home and wedding venue, Alex's reliability made everything run smoothly. I enjoyed our life together in the new house. But my mother-in-law Kelly and sister-in-law Jo were a constant source of stress. My father-in-law had passed away a decade ago, leaving Alex's family as just Kelly and 27-year-old Jo. I had minimal contact with them before our marriage and hoped to maintain a polite distance. However, after the wedding, their presence became increasingly intrusive. Kelly began calling almost daily, demanding more money. "Can you increase my allowance? I can't live decently on what you give me. Just $200 more would be enough," she pleaded. I told her to ask Alex, as he was in charge of finances. she accused me of being extravagant and warned me that not taking care of my in-laws would bring bad karma. Despite my attempts to redirect her to Alex, she blamed me for her financial troubles. Kelly also insisted that I visit her more often, help with chores, and send her favorite foods monthly. While Kelly harangued me over the phone, Joe started showing up unannounced, adding to my stress. While I was cooking dinner, Kelly frequently dropped by unannounced, saying things like, "I was in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd pop in. Is dinner ready yet? I'm starving. Hurry up." She would make herself comfortable on the sofa, waiting for me to finish cooking, and then leave after eating. Despite my repeated requests for her to give me notice before visiting and to come less often, she always brushed off my concerns. "Don't worry about it, I'm just stopping by. Just feed me whatever," she'd say dismissively. I tried to address the issue with Alex, and he did speak to both Kelly and Joe about their behavior. Despite this, I didn't feel it was appropriate to be too harsh with them, given that Joe was Alex's sister. 6 months into our marriage, Alex and I finally went on our long-awaited honeymoon in Europe, which had been postponed due to our busy schedules. We enjoyed every moment, unwinding and escaping from daily stress. However, when we returned home after a smooth week-long trip, we were greeted by strange noises coming from inside the house. Panic set in as I wondered if we were dealing with a burglary. "Did you hear that? Maybe there's someone in the house. Shouldn't we call the police?" I asked Alex, but he didn't seem concerned at all. "It's all right," he said calmly, walking into the house as if nothing was wrong. I quickly followed Alex into the house and was relieved to find Kelly and Joe instead of burglars. However, I was puzzled about why they were there. "Oh, you're back. Did you bring me a souvenir? The bracelet I asked for? Did you get it?" Kelly asked, clearly expecting something. "Of course not, it was too expensive," she replied when I said I hadn't. While the three of them chatted away happily, I couldn't help but wonder about their presence. Why are you guys here?" I asked. Kelly looked at me with a hint of annoyance. "Are you saying our presence is a nuisance? An empty house is an easy target for burglars while you were on vacation. We went out of our way to protect it, so you should be grateful." Apparently, they had offered to watch the house while we were away, and Alex had given them the key. I had told Alex that he should have discussed this with me first. He replied that he hadn't had time because they had approached him at the last minute. What was done, so I tried to accept that the house was safe thanks to their efforts. As I looked around, however, I saw the extent of the mess they had left. Every room was cluttered with their belongings. Joe's clothes were crammed into the closet, with the overflow strewn across the floor. In the living room, clothes, bags, remote controls, comic books, and other items were scattered everywhere, not just on the table but also on the floor. After a long flight, I was exhausted and frustrated by the thought of cleaning up all this mess. That wasn't the only issue at hand. I had hoped that once we arrived home, Kelly and Joe would leave, but they didn't. "It's going to be dark soon. If you don't go home now, you'll be stuck here," I said, trying to be polite. "Why don't you let us take it easy today?" Kelly responded. Not only did they refuse to leave, but they also took over the living room and started taking showers without asking. They had completely made themselves at home. Expected them to leave the next morning, but there was no sign of them moving out. When I came home from work, they were still there. I told them it was time for them to go. "We're family. You don't have to worry about us. Just pretend we're not here," they insisted. Despite their insistence that I ignore their presence, I was the one who ended up cooking, cleaning, and doing the laundry. I felt overwhelmed and frustrated. If I didn't take action, they seemed ready to stay as long as they wanted. I decided I needed to ask Alex to intervene and ask them to leave. As I was tidying up my room, I noticed that one of my limited edition perfumes, worth over $300 and no longer available for sale, was missing. I had been using it sparingly. Panic set in and I asked Kelly if she had seen it, but she claimed she didn't even know I had perfume. When I questioned Jo, she pulled out the bottle from her bag and handed it to me. To my dismay, it was nearly empty. I had been careful with my limited edition perfume, and there was still more than 6% left. When I confronted Jo about the missing perfume, she simply said, "It smells nice, doesn't it?" My friend liked it too, so I lent it to her. She'd offered no apology, and my frustration boiled over. "Why did you use it without asking? What you're doing is theft. Didn't you learn that stealing from others is wrong?" I demanded. Jo brushed off my anger. "I only borrowed it for a moment. Why are you overreacting? If you're so concerned, just take back what's left. If you borrowed it, then give me back what you used," I'd insisted. "Fine, but since it's already used, I'll only give you half the money," she retorted. "I don't want the money, I want the perfume back," I said firmly. Jo rolled her eyes. "You're so unreasonable over a bottle of perfume. I know the brand and it shouldn't be that expensive." She checked the price on her phone and was taken aback. "Holy cow, why is it so expensive? Are you really going to spend $300 on perfume? If it's that important, maybe you should have mentioned it." Seeing her reaction, I felt even more disheartened. "It's valuable to me, and I only used it inside the house. I never imagined I'd have a relative come into my room and use my things without permission." As we'd argued, Alex walked in. "What's all this fuss about?" "Alex, she used my perfume and called me a thief," I said, leaving Jo in the living room while I explained everything to him in the bedroom. "I'm at my limit. I need you to ask them to leave." "Don't get so worked up over something minor," Alex replied dismissively. "Also, I haven't mentioned that they're going to be living with us here." My jaw dropped at his unexpected announcement. My mom's house was old and falling apart, so she was considering repairs or moving. "We have extra rooms and it's more cost-effective for her to stay here. We decided to live together. Why didn't you talk to me about this? Do you own the house alone?" "I'm paying the mortgage too. Don't blame me, my mom decided to sell her house on her own," I protested. Alex's response was blunt. "We're living together now, so if you don't like it, you can leave." His decision, made without my input, and his suggestion that I leave left me feeling distant and hurt. I realized my feelings for him were fading. "I understand," I said quietly. I started packing the essentials into my carry-on case. Alex didn't try to stop me but remarked that running away after a fight was immature before walking out of the bedroom. Kelly and Jo watched with smirks as I packed, and as soon as I left the house, they locked the door behind me. I had no intention of returning. I headed to a hotel and called my boss, with whom I regularly consulted, to request a few days off. During my time off, I searched for an apartment and informed my parents that I had separated from Alex, explaining the situation. They asked what my next steps were, and I told them I planned to get a divorce. In the meantime, Alex sent me a text. "If you're sorry, you can come back. Mommy and Jo both say they'd forgive you." When I called him to discuss the divorce, he initially resisted, saying, "You're divorcing me over this. You just need to put up with it a little longer." Eventually, he recognized my determination and agreed to the divorce. From that point, everything progressed smoothly, and the divorce was finalized within 6 months. I wanted to end things as quickly as possible, so we swiftly divided our assets and I handed over the house to him. We had been married for less than a year and now we were divorced. My friends and coworkers were concerned and curious about what had happened. Initially, I shrugged off their questions, unable to share the details. But as I processed everything, I became more open about the situation. When I told them the full story, their reactions were unanimous. "That's impossible." I appreciated the sympathy from my friends and coworkers. It made me feel a bit better, knowing they were supportive of my situation. After moving out and living alone, I threw myself into work with renewed intensity. Instead of spending time on household chores, I took on 3 times as many projects as usual and even helped out colleagues who were overwhelmed. My boss noticed my dedication and expressed concern, but as I immersed myself in work, the memories of my difficult times resurfaced and I began to blame myself. Despite being grateful for the distraction work provided, Alex called me about 5 months after the divorce. I had left most of my belongings behind when I moved out, so I answered the phone thinking it might be about that. Alex started by asking what I was doing and if I was living alone. His approach seemed unusual because he was typically impatient with vague conversations. I didn't want to waste time, so I asked directly why he was calling. He said he wanted to get back together. I had no interest in rekindling the relationship, so I said no and attempted to end the call. But Alex quickly interjected. "Wait, there's something I haven't told you yet." "I'm busy, so make it quick," I replied. He continued, "Can you lend me some money? I'm struggling to pay the mortgage. It used to be a joint responsibility, so I understand it's hard to manage alone." I knew the amount Alex needed wasn't that significant, but he explained that he had been expecting a raise a few months ago that never materialized. He had also been informed that his performance wouldn't warrant any future increases. Faced with this, he decided to look for a new job, hoping for better conditions. Unfortunately, he only found a lower-paying position and had yet to secure a new role. Regardless of his situation, I wasn't willing to lend him any money. Told him not to contact me again. "You're still single, right? No one will want a middle-aged divorcee like you. You'd be better off reconciling with me," he said. I simply replied, "No, thank you," and ended the call. I couldn't understand why I had fallen for and married him. I was deeply disappointed in my own judgment. After that, Alex, Kelly, and Joe all began to harass me. Through our conversations, I learned that they believed Alex was earning a substantial income due to us buying a new house and having a lavish wedding. Since their allowance hadn't increased and Alex had refused to do so, they thought I was the one preventing it. They had been pleased to live comfortably after I left, but when they discovered Alex's salary was lower than expected, they panicked. They seemed to think that men were paid more than women, but my salary was actually higher than his. I wanted to block all of them on my phone, but Alex knew where I worked and could easily find me. I was anxious that Alex might call me at work or even show up at my office, so I answered his calls a few times. He consistently complained about Kelly and Joe spending too much money and running out of savings. They had started working part-time but couldn't make ends meet because they spent their earnings so quickly. It seemed like every conversation revolved around money. I hoped that if I told him I was in a similar financial situation, he might stop calling. I decided to use this approach the next time he reached out. That day, as usual, Alex called and said, "I need money. I don't have enough to pay the mortgage this month." I replied, "Actually, I'm planning to resign from my job soon. I've spent most of my savings, so I need some money from you. If you think I'm lying, you can check with someone at my work." Alex simply said, "I see," and ended the call. After that, he stopped contacting me. When I shared this with a friend, she informed me that Alex's situation was even worse than I had realized. He had ended up with a lower-paying job, and most of his salary went towards the mortgage. Additionally, Joe had an affair with her part-time job manager, who was married. When his wife discovered the affair, she fired Joe and filed a civil lawsuit against her. Initially, Joe claimed that the manager had pursued her and she didn't know he was married. However, text exchanges revealed she was aware of his wife's pregnancy and still pursued him. The manager and his wife divorced, and Joe faced a substantial compensation claim. Joe's affair and subsequent lawsuit led to her losing both her job and her friends. Alex's family ended up covering the mortgage and the debt from the lawsuit, effectively living in a cycle of debt. Kelly, meanwhile, complained that her friends had grandchildren while her own children were still single and struggling. Alex often lamented to this friend about his daily arguments with Kelly, his current single status, and how women no longer showed interest in him. He had lost weight and looked disheveled, aging far beyond his years. His friend rolled her eyes at his complaints. Had shared the reasons for my divorce with many people, and now this friend was the only one Alex had left to confide in. She was the one who introduced us and felt a sense of responsibility for how things turned out. Although she found his constant drama oddly intriguing, she stayed in touch with him to keep him away from me. As for me, I recently launched a web magazine with a university friend. I left my previous job and invested most of my savings into the startup. Though it's a small venture and I handle many tasks on my own, I am thrilled by the new challenges. Where I once felt daunted by new beginnings, I now manage them with confidence, having grown from past obstacles. I've also started a new relationship with someone I met at work. He respects my feelings and supports me, helping me realize that Alex was not a decisive leader but simply selfish. For a while after my divorce, I doubted that I would ever marry or date again. Now I am able to think positively and cherish the new happiness in my life.
You already had the divorce papers ready? How's that? I scared you, didn't I? Because I'm ready for this at any time. So you better cool down and reflect on what you just said. With that, my husband Lance got up and went into his room. My name is Alice, a 28-year-old office worker. I married Lance a year ago after meeting him on a blind date. He pursued me, and after a year and a half of dating, we decided to tie the knot. In hindsight, it may have been too soon, but I had always vaguely envisioned getting married and starting a family by the time I was 30, so I accepted his proposal. But I quickly realized that I should have been more cautious about such life-changing decisions. The first red flag came when Lance abruptly announced he was changing jobs right after we got married. "I'm changing jobs," he said, completely out of the blue. "Why so suddenly?" I asked, trying to understand his reasoning. "Because I can't show my full potential there," he replied confidently. I was taken aback, wondering what he meant. He informed me that he had already submitted his resignation and would be leaving his job at the end of the month. Although he was able to secure a new position, the salary was significantly lower than what he had been earning before. At the time, I thought it would be okay since I was also working, but then came the next surprise. Lance started pressuring me to quit my job. If Lance's new salary had been sufficient to cover our living expenses, I might have considered it, but with his recent job change and reduced income, quitting my job would have left us in a precarious financial situation. Despite Lance's assurances that his salary would soon increase, there was no clear timeline for when that would happen. Without my income, we wouldn't be able to save any money, and we'd struggle to cover basic expenses like rent and car maintenance. So I told Lance, "I won't quit my job until your salary goes up." Lance seemed to agree, but he kept asking me to quit, bringing it up repeatedly. Each time, I gave him the same response. A year into our marriage, his salary still hadn't increased, yet he continued to ask, "When are you going to quit?" I was tempted to sarcastically say, "Now," but I couldn't, not yet. If he wanted me to quit so badly, he needed to focus on earning more. Instead, he should concentrate on his work rather than persistently pressuring me. I began to wonder why Lance was so eager for me to quit my job, and eventually, I realized it. Lance wanted me to take care of his mother, Sarah. Whenever we visited my in-laws, Lance would say, "I just want to make things easier for you, Mom," and Sarah would respond, "Thank you, Lance. That's very kind of you." Lance would then glance at me, silently pressuring me to quit my job. He claimed his mother needed care, but the truth was Sarah wasn't ill at all. She was healthy, active, and financially independent, earning enough from her part-time job to enjoy her hobbies and social life. She didn't need my help at all. If I were Sarah, I'd be insulted by the notion that I needed to be taken care of when I was perfectly capable of taking care of myself. But Lance still insists that I should take care of his mother, Sarah. "Oh, if only one of us were home during the day, we could check on Mom every day," Lance blurts out, clearly expecting me to be that person. It's tiresome to keep hearing this, but I finally ask, "Sarah is in perfect health. What exactly do you want me to do?" "There's plenty you could do," Lance responds, almost as if it's obvious. "You could help with the housework, run errands for her. There's always something that needs doing." But Sarah has a part-time job and spends a lot of time socializing with her friends. She's not even home most of the day, I point out. "Even if Mom's not home, you could still do the housework, couldn't you?" he counters. What? Is he serious? So, you want me to be her housekeeper? It's becoming increasingly clear that Lance just wants to look good in front of his parents, to appear like the dutiful son. If he cares so much about taking care of them, he should be the one doing the housework. I have no patience for Lance's superficial pride. Naturally, I didn't quit my job, and I certainly didn't start visiting my in-laws daily. I only went over during holidays like New Year's. Thinking back, Lance has always been like this when we visit his parents. He would order me around, telling me to clean up, help Mom, or see if there's anything we need from the store. But I never took the initiative to do these things. When I pushed back, saying, "Don't you know this area better than I do? You should go to the store," he would always reply, "It doesn't count if I do it." What does that even mean? I'm starting to realize that it's not about caring for his parents at all. Lance just wants to boss me around to make himself feel good by appearing like the ideal son. Is he really more concerned with looking good than with actually caring about me? That's how I'm beginning to see him. When I boldly asked him, "Why don't you try helping out or quit your job to take care of your own mother?" Lance looked visibly uncomfortable, his face twisting in disgust. "That's not something I'm supposed to do," he retorted. "I'm giving you these instructions so that my mom will see you as a considerate and useful wife. You should appreciate how kind I am to you." So, in other words, he wants to dump all the inconvenient responsibilities on me while pretending he's doing something extraordinary. Well, I'm not your servant, your slave, or anything else. I certainly don't deserve to be belittled or treated like this in front of my in-laws. If Lance keeps making these unreasonable demands, I won't stay silent. I'll push back. But Lance remained the same, never changing his stance. He kept asking, "When are you going to quit your job?" And every time we visited his parents, he would order me around just like before. I had reached the end of my patience, so I decided it was time to have a serious conversation with my husband. "What do you mean, talk?" he asked, clearly annoyed. "I think we need to talk about our future," I replied. "Huh? What are you even trying to say?" he scoffed. "I'm honestly fed up, Lance. I'm fed up with you constantly asking me when I'm going to quit my job and pressuring me to take care of your mother." "Why are you fed up with that? You're my wife, and it's your duty to take care of your husband's parents," he shot back as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Don't you think that's a huge burden on me? Isn't it your responsibility as her biological child to help with the housework and care for your own parents?" I asked, trying to make him see reason. "No way," Lance snapped. "It's the wife's duty to do that. Are you really the kind of person who doesn't care about her family? I'm disappointed you'd even say such a thing." "Then let me ask you this," I countered. "How have you been taking care of my parents? If I asked you to take care of them, would you do it?" Lance looked at me blankly. "What are you saying? Why should a husband take care of his wife's parents?" "So that means you haven't been and won't take care of my parents?" I asked, feeling my frustration growing. "The husband's parents and the wife's parents are completely different," he replied, as if that explained everything. "What difference does it make? I don't understand," I said, exasperated. "I can't believe you're this clueless," Lance sneered. "It's like I'm talking to my old boss or something." "What are you trying to say?" I pressed. "I'm saying the husband's parents should always come first. The wife's parents should be your responsibility," he declared, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "What they?" So, in Lance's mind, the only family that matters is the one he's biologically related to. "I'm so disgusted by you," I snapped. "I'm not going to your parents' house anymore." "Huh? Why would you do that?" Lance asked, clearly taken aback. "Enough is enough. I'm tired of this," I retorted, my frustration boiling over. "No way. How dare you talk back like that?" Lance shot back, his voice rising. "My mom was right." "What do you mean, your mom was right?" I asked, my stomach sinking. "She said you're a badly behaved wife," Lance sneered. "That's why she gave me this." With that, he pulled a piece of paper out of his bag. It was divorce papers. "What? You already had the divorce papers ready?" I asked, shocked. Lance looked disturbingly proud of himself. "How's that? I scared you, didn't I? I'm ready for this at any time," he said smugly. "So you better cool down and reflect on what you just said." With that, Lance got up and went into his room, leaving me standing there in disbelief. No way. Why is Lance so selfish? And that triumphant look on his face, it's as if he thinks these divorce papers are some kind of weapon to make me submit to his will. The fact that Sarah had prepared the divorce papers made everything even clearer. Lance is nothing more than a mama's boy, eager to do whatever Sarah says while trying to boss me around. You've got to be kidding me. There's no way I'm letting Lance control me like this. Does he not realize that by pulling a stunt like this, he's already ended our marriage? His complete lack of common sense only makes me more determined. Lance had already filled out the divorce papers and handed them to me with the witness section signed by Sarah and his friends. It was obvious he was just waiting for me to fall in line. But instead, the next day, after Lance left for work, I filled out the rest of the divorce papers and submitted them to the city office. Just to be safe, I'd also filed a notice of non-acceptance of the marriage certificate, ensuring that there would be no way to reverse this decision. I called my parents to explain the situation because I knew Lance, who had given me the divorce papers as a threat, might try to file the marriage certificate on his own if he found out I had already submitted the divorce papers. My parents were shocked that I had gone through with the divorce so quickly, but were even more outraged by Lance's behavior. They immediately offered to help me move my belongings. I took a paid leave and had my parents come over while Lance was at work. Together, we moved everything out to my parents' house. I decided to stay with them for a while, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of comfort and peace. Looking back, Lance never did any housework. I was the one cooking dinner after a full day at work, cleaning, and doing laundry on my days off. On top of all that, he expected me to take care of his parents, which was simply unreasonable. That night, my phone rang. It was Lance, who must have just returned home. Hello? Hey, where are you right now? Lance demanded. I'm at my parents' house, I replied calmly. What? Why the hell would you go back to your parents' house without my permission? And where's all your stuff? Don't tell me you're staying there overnight. He sounded panicked. I almost laughed. How could he not realize I had taken most of my belongings with me? The fact that he thought I was just staying overnight spoke volumes about his selfishness. I moved out, I stated firmly. I'm not coming back. Huh? What the hell are you talking about? Come back here and make me some food, Lance demanded, his voice rising in frustration. You can prepare it yourself, I said, and without waiting for a response, I hung up the phone. I knew I couldn't have a rational conversation with Lance about the divorce if he was going to be like this, so I decided to block his number and wait for him to come to me. A week later, Lance finally lost his patience and showed up at my parents' house. But he didn't come alone. He brought his parents with him. All three of them looked grim as they entered the living room. We sat facing each other, 3 against 3. How could you do this? Lance started, his voice laced with indignation. I can't believe you would leave for such a long time without my permission. That's because you were treating me like your personal housekeeper, I replied calmly. All I asked was for you to take care of my family. Lance shot back as his parents, especially Sarah, glared at me. Don't twist things to suit your convenience, I countered. You've been forcing me to handle everything you don't want to deal with. I've told you over and over, that's not what I meant. Lance insisted, but his words rang hollow. Sarah jumped in, her voice sharp. What kind of wife are you? Lance has done so much for you. My father, who had been sitting quietly, began to tremble with anger. Sensing that he might lose his temper, I spoke up before things could escalate. Lance told me to quit my job and take care of Sarah. He said it was my duty as his wife, I explained. But when it comes to my family, he pushes all the responsibility onto me alone. In the end, Lance just wants me to obey him, take care of his parents, and let him take credit for it. He even told me that his parents were more important than mine, and that they should always be the priority. I could see the surprise on my father-in-law Robert's face. He looked at Lance, clearly taken aback. It was evident that Robert hadn't heard any of this before. And to top it off, I continued, Lance suddenly pulled out divorce papers, claiming it was Sarah's idea. What? Robert turned to Sarah, his tone questioning. Did you really suggest that to Lance? Sarah hesitated, flustered. Well, it's just that Alice has been so difficult. And did you really say that Alice's parents aren't a priority? Robert pressed. Lance stammered. Well, it's just normal for your own parents to come first, right? Don't be ridiculous, Robert snapped. I came here because I thought you were facing unreasonable hardships, but from what I'm hearing, you're the one at fault. Don't be a coward and try to use your parents' influence to get your way. Lance shrank under his father's rebuke. Robert had said everything I had wanted to say to Lance and more. He then turned to me and my parents, offering a sincere apology. I'm sorry, Alice, he said, his voice full of regret. And to you both as well, he added, nodding to my parents. I am truly sorry for the trouble my foolish son has caused you, Robert said, his voice heavy with regret. I will give him a strict lecture. Robert, you're not at fault here, I replied gently. Please don't blame yourself, and thank you for your kind words. I took a deep breath, but there's one more thing I need to say. Lance, sensing something serious, asked, What do you mean? The divorce papers you gave me, I began. I've already filed them. We're no longer married. What? No. Lance and Sarah both turned pale, shock washing over their faces. How could you do that without my permission? Lance sputtered. You told me I could file them whenever I wanted. I reminded him, my voice steady. You even had Sarah sign the witness section for you. Lance stammered, but that was just to scare you. Robert's face darkened with anger as he turned to his son. So you used it to threaten her. I spoke up, echoing Robert's frustration. Exactly. He thought he could intimidate me. How could you be so foolish? Robert snapped, his patience finally snapping. He struck Lance on the cheek, causing Sarah to gasp in shock. I'm sorry you had to witness that, Robert said, turning back to me, his voice filled with remorse. You were right to divorce this idiot. I apologize on Lance's behalf for ruining your marriage. Robert then grabbed Lance by the collar and demanded, You and Sarah better apologize too. They both muttered apologies before Robert led them out of the house. I felt a wave of relief. Robert had saved my parents from losing their temper, and later he ensured that all of Lance's property went to me in exchange for no alimony. Lance didn't dare defy his father, so I ended up with all our savings and other assets from the marriage. Though I had a higher income and was the one managing the household, Robert's intervention ensured that the division was fair, and I couldn't thank him enough. I later heard that Robert was so disgusted with Sarah's involvement that he divorced her as well. Recently, I ran into a former colleague of Lance's who told me that Lance wasn't good at his job and was constantly reprimanded by his boss. Apparently, Lance had quit out of spite and switched jobs. I hadn't known about this, and it only reinforced my belief that Lance had blamed everyone else for his own shortcomings. He wasn't making much money at his new job, so I'm grateful I left him when I did. I've since rented a cozy one-bedroom apartment and have been living comfortably on my own. Work is going well, and I even got a raise recently. I'm not interested in relationships right now. I'm focused on my career and personal growth. Looking back, it was clear that Lance was more concerned with appearances than with actually improving himself. He could only maintain his dignity at home, but not in the real world. There are so many men like him who think divorce papers can be used as a threat, believing they hold all the power. But that's a huge mistake. I hope anyone in a similar situation finds the strength to break free, just like I did. And I hope Alice finds someone wonderful in the future. Thank you for reading until the end. Please subscribe to our channel and see you in the next video. I bought a high-rise condo across from the station, but suddenly he brought up this story. Why now? It was surprising because he had purchased the condo behind my back while I was staying at my parents' house. It's an amazing place with a stunning view and spotless rooms, but I was in shock. He moved out of our apartment and into this luxurious condo without any explanation or apology, saying he used money from selling our old place. He told me, I'm going to live with mom and dad in this great house, so I don't need a parasite like you. It was outrageous. He decided to live with his parents without consulting me and kicked me out. I was speechless, not knowing where to begin. My name is Sarah. I'm a 32-year-old housewife, 8 months pregnant, eagerly counting down the days until I meet my baby. My husband, Richard, is 35 and works for a major company. We've been married for 3 years, and I was thrilled to finally be pregnant after struggling to conceive. However, I was also terrified of childbirth. To ease my anxiety, I spent time at my in-laws' home. Sarah, you're about to have a baby soon, huh? What's it like to become a mother? Jane, Richard's brother's wife, asked me. Jane is the reason I visit my in-laws. She's a housewife and lives with them, and I've grown close to her. My mother-in-law had trouble with her legs 2 years ago, and Jane, who has caregiving experience, agreed to help. She's quite capable but is always there to assist. Her kindness impressed me, and as a more experienced mother, she helped ease my worries about childbirth. Now, with only a month left until my due date, I plan to stay at my parents' house to prepare for the birth. Although my belly felt heavy, I enjoyed shopping for the baby and imagining our new life. Spending time at my parents' home felt refreshing after a long while. 2 days past my due date, contractions started, and I tried reaching Richard, but he didn't answer. I was concerned he might be busy or in trouble. As my labor pains intensified, I focused solely on giving birth. Eventually, I welcomed a beautiful baby girl into the world. I cradled my beautiful baby girl for the first time, overwhelmed with happiness. Richard was supposed to be there for the birth, but he didn't show up at the hospital. I was too exhausted from labor to confront him directly, so I simply texted him to let him know I had given birth and then fell asleep. When I woke up, I heard someone calling my name. "Are you still asleep?" Richard's voice was grating. I blinked open my eyes to find him standing by my bed, with his parents in tow. He greeted me cheerfully. "My parents came. You have to appreciate them." I had specifically asked not to have visitors immediately after giving birth, so I was taken aback that he had brought his parents along without asking me. Irritated, I asked, "Why didn't you come yesterday?" He responded casually, "I promised to go eat sushi with my parents. I thought I'd come after that, but I drank a lot and figured it would be better not to come and be a trouble." I couldn't believe his priorities. While he enjoyed sushi and drinks, I was left to struggle through childbirth alone. Ignoring my irritation, he asked, "Where's our baby?" "She's in the nursery, a healthy baby girl," I replied. My mother-in-law's face tightened at the news. "What a girl," she muttered. "Such a useless wife." I was stunned by her comment. My father-in-law chimed in. Both Jane and Sarah blew it. "You're pathetic." I was hurt and furious that, instead of receiving gratitude for enduring childbirth, I was insulted. Richard, too, seemed disappointed. "Oh, damn it. I knew it was a girl, but I hoped for a boy." I got my hopes up. I didn't understand his disappointment. He explained that his parents had high hopes for a boy since our first child was a girl, but that didn't matter to me. To me, my baby was perfect, no matter her gender. Richard's reaction left me feeling alone and unsupported, as he seemed more aligned with his parents' expectations than with celebrating our new arrival. I was fuming with anger, but exhaustion and soreness from childbirth made it hard to muster the energy to confront Richard. Thankfully, a nurse who had overheard our conversation through the wall intervened and asked his parents to leave the room. She noticed my distress and offered me comfort as I cried. Since then, Richard hadn't visited me in the hospital. On the day of my discharge, I arranged for my parents to pick us up and take us to their home. I didn't want to return to our place in such a state. I couldn't understand why Richard had become so cold-hearted. He seemed so much more caring when we first married. I wondered if his change in demeanor was linked to his work issues from 2 years ago. He had made a significant mistake that caused a huge loss for his company. Though his colleagues covered for him, he never faced any real consequences. Still, the error derailed his career, and he had struggled to get back on track. His frustration and stress may have contributed to his emotional distance. Additionally, one of his colleagues, who had joined the company later, was now his boss. Richard had been better at his job initially, but their roles reversed due to his earlier mistake. The reversal must have been hard for him to accept, adding to his stress and affecting his behavior at home. I felt a mix of dissatisfaction and hope that having our baby would spark some change in him, but he didn't seem to be making any effort. I worried about our family's future and felt overwhelmed by the uncertainty. Then Richard called me unexpectedly. "Hey, when are you coming back? You've been gone for almost a month since the baby was born." I wasn't ready to go back yet. "Sorry, I'll be home soon. I need to get things in order for our daughter and start fresh." Richard's response was shocking. "You don't need to bring all that stuff back. I actually just wanted to discuss something with you. Maybe I should have told you this in person rather than over the phone." I was stunned and confused by his abruptness. What did he mean? I was completely baffled by what Richard was saying. Then he dropped an even more shocking revelation. "I bought a high-rise condo across from the station." I was stunned. "Wait, what do you mean?" I asked, trying to make sense of his sudden announcement. Why was he bringing this up now? He described the condo's stunning view and immaculate rooms, but I was confused. He had moved out of our apartment and into this luxury condo without telling me while I was staying at my parents' house. I was flabbergasted. Where did the money come from? You shouldn't be able to afford that on your salary. He made no apologies and simply said, "I used the money from selling our house." I needed clearer explanations, not just bits of information. "You sold our house. Where are your parents living now?" He seemed oddly pleased as he replied, Daddy and Mommy are living with me in the condo now. I'm moving in with them, so I don't need a parasite like you. Get out. I was left speechless, unsure how to react. Richard had decided to live with his parents without consulting me and had kicked me out. He called his parents Daddy and Mommy with a new sense of familiarity and announced they were living together in the condo. He practically asked for a divorce. As I stood there, dumbfounded, he continued, You're so arrogant for a housewife. You're useless without my salary. You've got a dead weight lately, especially with your morning sickness. I tried to explain that I had been busy right up until giving birth, but he wouldn't listen. He added, And our baby isn't a boy. My parents think it's better to be with a younger woman who might give them a boy. They also don't want to live with you and my brother anymore. He told me he had put my things in a storage room and instructed me to pick them up. As for the divorce, I've already sent you the papers. Make sure to file them. And with that, he hung up on me. I was stunned and paralyzed by the shock. How had I ended up married to someone so callous? I felt like I had made a terrible mistake, but there was no point in dwelling on it now. My priority was my daughter. I had to pull myself together for her sake. After taking some time to process everything, I resolved to sever all ties with Richard and begin a new chapter in my life. I was determined not to let him control me any longer. If a divorce was what it took, then so be it. I would show him who would truly regret this decision. My parents were furious when I told them about the situation. They immediately agreed to support me through the divorce. As soon as I received the divorce papers from Richard, I signed and filed them. About 2 weeks later, Richard unexpectedly showed up at my parents' house. Hey, what's going on? He demanded. Why has so much money been withdrawn from my bank account? He slammed his bank statements onto the table, glaring at me. I remained calm and replied, Aren't you familiar with the term division of property? What's that supposed to mean? He retorted, baffled. That's not what this is. The account in question is mine, I said firmly. I'm not giving you a cent. I had previously deposited some money into your account, but it was shared property. I'm taking back what's rightfully mine. He was infuriated. Why should I give you my money? You've forgotten that your salary went down because of your mistake at work. I started a side job at home. I'm sure you didn't earn as much as I did. Actually, I earned as much as you did, I countered, and you're the one who wanted the divorce. This conversation is over. Richard was incredulous. You've got to be kidding me. I don't believe this. My father, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up. How about we take this to court? How dare you insult my daughter? I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for my daughter, who had endured so much because of Richard. Get out of here, you bastard, I shouted. My father, a policeman, intimidated by Richard's menacing demeanor, made him flee from our house. That was the final end to our relationship, and asset division issues were resolved. Since then, I've been focusing on raising my daughter at my parents' house. Adjusting to parenting has been a challenge, but she is an absolute joy. My life has taken on a new, happier rhythm with my adorable baby girl. A few months later, I started receiving persistent calls from an unknown number. Though I had ignored them initially, I decided to answer, thinking it might be my boss or colleagues. Hello, I answered. Hello, Sarah. It was Richard. What do you want? I asked sharply. How are you doing? He asked. I don't really want to discuss that. Can I hang up now? Wait, can you come back? I'm having trouble paying the mortgage on the condo. I might get kicked out. I wasn't surprised. You're short on cash, aren't you? Yeah, I've used up all my savings. Daddy hurt his back and had to quit his job. Mommy brags about her life, but now she's always sick. I'm at my wit's end. I wasn't shocked by his predicament. With his salary, he likely couldn't manage the condo's mortgage. He must have relied on his savings, his father's salary, and a down payment. Now that his father couldn't work and his mother spent extravagantly, he was struggling to cover their expenses. It was no wonder he was in trouble. When I checked my bank balance, it was at zero. I was informed that if I didn't pay by next week, I would be evicted. Please come back, Sarah. We used to care about each other. I laughed, finding his pleas almost amusing. Give me a break. You just want to exploit me whenever you need something. You expect me to support you and act as your housekeeper. Richard fell silent, and I remembered how he had called me a parasite. Wouldn't I just be in the way? I retorted, recalling the hurtful words he had used before. I had something weighing on my mind. What about Jane and your brother? They've already moved out and are living together now, he said. He had a falling out with our parents when my brother told Dad to live more appropriately. My brother lost his temper and said, I don't want to be told what to do by someone who's dependent on a woman who couldn't even give him a son. Usually calm, my brother blew up. He left the house saying, I'll cut you off if you keep making fun of my wife. I see. It sounds like he's a decent person. It's good to know he cares about Jane, I responded. Please come back, Sarah. Are you serious? Who would ever return to you? I'm fully occupied with taking care of my daughter. I can deal with jerks like you. By the way, calling your parents daddy and mommy at your age is pathetic, I added. Don't say stuff like that. You can take our daughter here if you want. Weren't you supposed to live with our daughter when you first asked me? Oh, I see. You don't even remember. You had your daughter, didn't you? I would never take her to a father like you. Don't ever call me again. If you show up again, I'll call the police and my dad will make sure you get arrested. He made a pathetic sound, clearly recalling my dad's intimidating presence. I hung up and blocked him. Later, he tried calling me from a new number, but I had changed mine too. A bit later, Jane contacted me. I'm sorry for not reaching out sooner. We moved to the countryside, and it took us a while to get internet access set up. Jane and her family had decided to live in a peaceful, rural setting. I visited their new home and found it to be a charming town surrounded by nature. I imagined how happy and well-adjusted my child would be growing up in such an environment. Jane's husband filled me in on my ex. He and his family were eventually evicted from their high-rise condo and burdened with debt. He was struggling to support his parents and barely making ends meet. In contrast, I was thriving. I worked from home and lived comfortably at my parents' house. Today, I was going to relax at Jane's place for a few days before returning to spend more time with my daughter. Once my daughter was a bit older, I hoped we could move to the area and live near Jane. With that bright future in mind, I happily enjoyed my time. Buying a high-rise condo while your wife is pregnant is insane. Maybe if you're rich, but it's ridiculous on a normal income, I thought. I was relieved to have left such an unlikable husband behind. I wished Jane and her family all the best, hoping they would continue to live harmoniously together. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.
My name is Mariana and I'm 40 years old. I work as a medical assistant and have been married for 12 years. My husband John and I have 2 wonderful children, a son who's in 3rd grade and a daughter who's in 1st grade. John and I met when he frequently visited the hospital where I work to handle sales. I was the one who always assisted him. At first, we only exchanged small talk, but when we discovered we had mutual friends, our connection deepened. After sharing several dinners, we started dating, and 3 years later, we got married. John is incredibly bright, well-spoken, and a natural communicator. He often says that working in sales was his true calling. To be honest, John wasn't my type physically at first, but as we got to know each other, I found myself falling in love with him. It's been 15 years since we first met, and even now, after the kids are in bed, we can talk for hours, losing track of time. Our children, Patrick and Katie, have grown up wonderfully, and like their father, they are both talkative and full of life, making our home lively every day. I think we're a pretty typical family. John is also very hands-on with household chores. Sometimes he'll announce what he's cooking for dinner, like tonight's steak, and when he does, Patrick and Katie eagerly head off to school, excited for the day. John wasn't always a great cook. In fact, when we first met, he couldn't cook at all. But over time, his cooking skills have improved, and I'm amazed at how much he's learned. The reason John handles dinner is because I'm often not home in the evenings. My mother has been in the hospital for a long time due to a chronic illness, and I visit her every day after work. Initially, I would rush home to prepare dinner, but one day John offered to take over. He told me, I'll cook dinner and take care of the kids. You focus on spending time with your mother. His kindness brought me to tears. From that day on, I made sure to prepare breakfast and do as many household chores as I could before work. John took care of dinner, looked after the kids, and helped them with their homework in the evenings. My mother has been in and out of the hospital for the past 3 years, and lately her condition has worsened. I'm not sure what the future holds, so visiting her every day helps me cope with my anxiety. I lost my father in an accident when I was very young, and as an only child, it was just my mother and me until I got married. My mother was a smart woman, working in the same medical office as I do now. She also invested in stocks with the inheritance from my father, which brought in extra income. Thanks to her, I was able to attend private schools and live without any financial worries. When my mother was temporarily discharged from the hospital, I repeatedly told my mother that I wanted her to live with us, but she always shook her head, perhaps out of concern for our family. "It's okay, Mariana. You worry too much. I'm better than you think," she would say each time I asked her to stay with us. Fortunately, my mother was able to manage her daily activities on her own and didn't require any nursing care. However, I was still anxious, so I made it a point to visit her every day, even after she was discharged from the hospital. Since I have to work, I could only visit her in the evenings on weekdays. During the day, my Aunt Michelle would visit her. Aunt Michelle is single and has been running a small restaurant since before I was born. As a little girl, I often went to eat dinner with my mother at Aunt Michelle's restaurant. When my mother was away at work, Aunt Michelle would take care of me and keep me company. During my rebellious phase, whenever I fought with my mother, I would run away to Aunt Michelle's place to cool down. I vividly remember how, over the food she cooked, our conversations would make me forget what I was angry about. In many ways, I feel like I was raised by both my mother and Aunt Michelle. Her cooking is amazing, and some of her regular customers have been coming to her restaurant since I was a little girl. Even after I got married, my family often visited Aunt Michelle's restaurant for meals. Then one day, I visited my mother at the hospital until just before visiting hours ended, and by the time I returned home, it was quite late. To my surprise, my mother-in-law was still at our place and the children were still awake, all four of them relaxing in the living room. "Oh, Mariana, welcome back. Were you visiting your mother at the hospital again today? You must be exhausted after such a long day," she greeted me. My parents-in-law live about a 5-minute drive from us. My mother-in-law, Rachel, doesn't bully or pick on me, but she can be quite stubborn, which makes it difficult for us to get along. Once she decides on something, she insists on having it her way and won't budge. When Rachel visits our home like this, it's usually because she wants money. My father-in-law, Craig, still has a job and works very hard, but we're not wealthy by any means. For the past few years, Rachel has asked us to send her $500 every month as living expenses. However, lately she has been coming over more often, asking for additional money whenever she claims to be in need. Today, Rachel said she came to see her grandchildren, but I suspected she probably wanted money. After we made sure the kids were in bed asleep, Rachel turned to me and said, "I'm sorry, but I'm short on money again this month. Could you give me a little more?" John, frustrated, replied, "We've been giving you money for living expenses every month. My father is still working, so what are you spending all that money on?" "Don't be so angry," Rachel responded. "I'm getting old and I have medical bills to pay. Are you telling me not to go to the hospital? Besides, your father's salary has been reduced because of the recession." Every time she asks for money, John tries to reason with her, but Rachel never backs down. I've witnessed this exchange many times, but no matter what, my mother-in-law always finds an excuse and refuses to leave until we give her the money. I calmed my angry husband down and handed Rachel the $200 I had just found in my wallet. After giving her the money, John left to take a bath, so I walked Rachel to the door. "Thank you, Mariana, you're always so supportive," she said with a smile. Then, in an unusual turn, she asked, "By the way, how is your mother doing?" It was the first time Rachel had ever inquired about my mother, which caught me off guard. She had hardly ever visited her, so I wondered why she was asking now. Nevertheless, I replied, "Well, she's still the same. The doctors have told me this hospital stay is going to be a long one." Rachel nodded and then, to my surprise, bluntly asked, "Oh, I see. What will happen to your inheritance?" I was taken aback by her sudden question, So I responded, "What inheritance?" "What do you mean?" Rachel continued, "I was just wondering if you've already had those conversations with your mother. I believe she has a sister, right? You should talk to your mother about this matter now, before it's too late. After all, you wouldn't want to have any trouble with your aunt about the inheritance when the time comes, would you?" Her words made me angry and irritated, so I replied firmly, "Don't worry. My aunt and I don't have that kind of relationship. There won't be any trouble." A few weeks later, John, who had taken the children to his parents' house for the holiday, came home in a panic. "Mariana, my mother bought a mansion near your workplace." "A mansion near my work? But that place is still under construction," I said, confused. Since we lived in the countryside, the mansion was quite conspicuous. Whenever we passed by the construction site, John and I would often wonder who would live in such a grand place. "What? Where did she get that kind of money?" I asked, completely baffled. Asked him in surprise. Where would she get that kind of money? John shook his head, clearly puzzled. "I have no idea. I questioned her a lot, but she wouldn't give me a straight answer. Maybe she's relying on my father's retirement money," he speculated. A thought crossed my mind. If Rachel can afford a mansion, does that mean we don't need to give her money for living expenses anymore? Exactly, John agreed, his frustration growing. It doesn't make any sense. If she has enough money to buy a mansion, she should have more than enough for her living expenses. We were both angry and irritated, realizing we had been giving Rachel money, believing she was in need. If she could afford a mansion, her claims of financial hardship were clearly false. John and I decided then and there that we would stop giving her money, no matter what she said in the future. Supposedly, her mortgage and deposit on the mansion had been approved, and it would be completed in 6 months. Rachel had told John she was thrilled about living in a mansion during her old age. But just a month after this conversation, my mother passed away. I was in shock because she had seemed well and healthy when I visited her the day before. It was a bittersweet blessing that I received a call at work saying my mother was in critical condition. I was able to leave early and rush to the hospital, just in time to be with her in her final moments. "She may have been waiting for you to come, Mariana," Aunt Michelle, who had arrived earlier, said softly as I broke down in tears. There was so much to handle with the wake and funeral that I barely had time to grieve. After seeing my mother off and returning home, the reality of her absence began to sink in. I lost all my strength and broke down in tears, but my children comforted me. After the funeral, I spent the rest of the day busy with cleaning up my mother's house. As Aunt Michelle and I sorted through her belongings, we came across so many memories, and I couldn't stop crying as they flooded back. John was incredibly supportive during this time, helping with the household chores and taking care of the children, despite being busy with work himself. I can't express how grateful I am for his support. My children were so sweet and attentive to my feelings. Patrick tried his best to cheer me up with funny stories from school, while Katie proudly showed me her A+ on a test, hoping to make me smile. I cried a lot after my mother's passing, but John, Patrick, Katie, and Aunt Michelle took such good care of me and gave me the strength to get through it. 3 days after the funeral, when I returned home from another day of cleaning up my mother's house, Rachel was there again. As soon as I walked through the door, she abruptly said, "When will you get the deposit?" "The payment is due soon." "Deposit? Payment? What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. "I'm talking about your inheritance. You got a lot of money, didn't you?" Rachel demanded. "Inheritance? I renounced my inheritance," I replied, surprised by her aggressive tone. "What? Are you kidding me?" Rachel's voice boomed, echoing throughout the house. After my mother passed away, I found out that her inheritance was nearly $2 million. My mother had told me she wanted me and Aunt Michelle to split it 50-50. However, my mother often spoke to me about her wishes for Aunt Michelle, saying, "If anything should happen to me, please take care of Michelle." I hoped Aunt Michelle would use my inheritance to renovate her restaurant. Oh, Mother, don't say such ominous things, I often replied when she brought up the topic. Even the day before she passed away, my mother was still worried about Aunt Michelle's restaurant. Are there still customers coming to Michelle's restaurant? She asked. She mentioned the AC breaking down again, and I'm concerned. Aunt Michelle's restaurant, built before I was born, was indeed showing its age. My mother had offered many times to help with renovations, but Aunt Michelle always refused, saying she felt bad about spending my mother's money and didn't want to close the restaurant during repairs. While Aunt Michelle managed to keep the restaurant running, the building was deteriorating, and the cost of necessary repairs was becoming a burden. She once confided in me that although her loyal regulars still came, attracting new customers was difficult, likely due to the restaurant's outdated appearance. Having been a frequent customer myself, for many years I wanted Aunt Michelle to continue running the restaurant for as long as she could. Aunt Michelle, who had always prioritized work, spent money on the restaurant even if it meant cutting back on her own living expenses. She lived on the second floor of the restaurant, leading a very frugal life, which worried me whenever I visited her. Although the cost of ingredients had increased, she hardly raised the prices on her menu, always prioritizing her customers' satisfaction. Given that John and I both work and are financially stable, I felt no need for the inheritance. I wanted Aunt Michelle to have it all so she could finally renovate her beloved restaurant. Initially, Aunt Michelle refused, but when I told her that my mother had been worried about her even the day before she passed away, she finally agreed to accept it. When I discussed it with John, he supported my decision. We had been regulars at Aunt Michelle's restaurant since we started dating, often remarking on how delicious the food was and wishing she had more customers to enjoy it. When I told Rachel that I had renounced my inheritance, she snapped at me, her voice filled with anger. What? Why would you do such a thing without consulting me? How am I supposed to pay for my mansion now? Your mansion? What are you talking about? John interjected. I thought you already finished paying it off. Rachel, clearly frustrated, retorted, the down payment is due in just a week. I've been waiting for your inheritance to come through. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The idea that Rachel had bought a mansion expecting to use my mother's inheritance to pay for it was infuriating. What did you just say? Don't you dare bring my mother into this, I shot back, my voice shaking with anger. Even if I had received the inheritance, why would I pay for your mansion? This was the first time I had ever spoken so strongly to my mother-in-law, and tears of anger welled up in my eyes. Of course you should pay for my mansion. I'm your mother. Rachel yelled. You were so eager to get your mother's inheritance that you neglected your own family, just to visit her. Her words were like a slap in the face. How could you say such a horrible thing? I never wanted anything like that. My mother didn't want it either. Please, just leave. I had only ever been concerned about my mother's well-being. I never once discussed inheritance with her. All I wanted was for her to live as long as possible. Thought that Rachel could claim any right to my mother's legacy was beyond infuriating. Mom, that's just plain rude, John said, his tone firm. Mariana never had any such idea in her head. And what did you do for her mother? You barely even visited her. I'm really disappointed in you. Please go home. We won't be supporting your living expenses anymore. Rachel's face twisted in anger as she spat out, You two are terrible children. I'm leaving. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. After she left, John turned to me, his expression filled with regret. I'm so sorry about my mother. I had no idea what she was thinking. You don't have to worry about her, John said, apologizing as he spoke. Later, John explained that because of Rachel's age, she had agreed to a shorter mortgage term, which required a higher down payment. From that day on, Rachel called John daily, trying to get him to lend her money, but he stood firm and refused. As Rachel's demands became more persistent, John decided to talk to his father, Jeff, about the situation. When he did, both Jeff and Rachel came to our house to apologize. Jeff was completely in the dark about what had been happening. He knew they were planning to buy the mansion, but he thought they were going to use their savings. He also had no idea that John and I had been giving Rachel money for living expenses, or that she had been asking for even more. I was shocked to hear from Jeff that Rachel had told him she was coming to our house to help with household chores while I was away visiting my mother in the hospital, something she never actually did. Jeff had left the money management to Rachel and was surprised to discover that she had far less saved than he believed. When Jeff confronted her, Rachel admitted that she had made poor investment choices, leading to significant financial losses. Jeff sincerely apologized to both John and me. "Mariana, I'm truly sorry for my wife's behavior. Rachel made a serious mistake and will handle the payments for the mansion. Please forget about it. I'll also make sure she repays the money you both gave her, even if it takes some time," Jeff said. Turning to Rachel, "Rachel, you need to apologize too." "I'm sorry," Rachel mumbled, her voice small, lacking the forcefulness she'd shown before. "It's all right if you're sincere," I replied, watching my mother-in-law shrink before my eyes. Despite the difficult situation, I felt a sense of relief. In the end, Rachel didn't have the money for the mansion's down payment. When she tried to secure a new loan, it was denied. Since Rachel had already given notice to move out of their current house and had nowhere to go, she and Jeff decided to downsize to a smaller apartment with lower rent. Rachel, who had never worked before, started working part-time to repay us. To lift our spirits, I took my family to Aunt Michelle's restaurant for dinner. Aunt Michelle excitedly told us that she had found a piece of land just around the corner and decided to build a new restaurant there instead of renovating the old one. "I want my regulars to keep enjoying my food every day," she said with a smile, offering us a taste of the new dishes she plans to serve after the relocation. After the move, Aunt Michelle will live in the house where my mother used to live. The new restaurant will be completed in a year and we're all looking forward to it. "Thank you so much. If anything ever happens to you, I'll be there for you. You can count on me," Aunt Michelle said seriously, her warmth evident. Her cooking has always been delicious, the same comforting taste I've known since childhood. Katie and Patrick love it too, and they were thrilled. As we enjoyed Aunt Michelle's food together as a family, I couldn't help but feel that my mother was smiling down on us from heaven.
"Hey Judy, what's wrong?" It was a cold day with Christmas carols echoing through the city. I paused to admire a tree ornament that had caught my eye. My husband, his breath visible in the chilly air, turned his head to look at me from a few steps ahead. He smiled softly, his ears flushed from the cold. I adored the way he looked at me. "Nothing. Let's head home and have dinner. I've made a hot stew for this particularly cold day." "Sounds great." Laughing, we held hands and strolled down the street. A familiar Christmas tune drifted into my ears. "I'm Judy," I began, "and what I'm about to tell you is a rather strange Christmas miracle I experienced a few years ago, and the story leading up to it." "You're late." Before I could respond, I flinched at the sharp edge in my husband Dan's voice. "Where have you been?" "I just went to the closest deli," I replied, trying to stay calm. It was mid-December, and it felt like snow was imminent. I'd been chased out of the cold without my coat a short time ago. "Are you trying to fool me? I'm the breadwinner of this household. When I come home, I expect dinner to be ready and served. Can't you even manage that?" He glared at me displeased as he looked at the dinner. "No hot sauce. How can you eat chicken wings without it? Don't mess with me." His harsh scolding made me rush out of the apartment with just my wallet and return with the hot sauce. As I gasped for breath, he grew even more irritated. "Delhi, are you crazy? Isn't it cheaper to buy at a supermarket?" He pointed at the hot sauce, rolling his eyes. "You have no sense of budgeting." I couldn't help but retort, "Of course, I buy groceries at the supermarket, but it's far away. I told you earlier, it slipped my mind today. Anyway, you get upset if the food gets cold. That's why I went to the closest shop. I did forget to add it to my shopping list, but I was sure the chicken wings would taste fine even without it." I didn't understand why he was so angry. His frustration seemed unrelenting. "Where's your apology?" I did apologize earlier, didn't I? What's with your attitude? My retort only fueled his anger further. He continued to yell for another hour. Who wants such stale food now? In the end, he flipped the plate of chicken wings and stormed out to get dinner elsewhere. A few days later, while cleaning my parents' house, which was up for sale, I visited an old lady in the neighborhood whom I called Grandma. Listen, Grandma, I said, your prediction was off this time. I didn't predict anything, Grandma, who had cared for me since I was a child, replied with a chuckle. You're going too far. No way, everything you predicted since I was a kid came true. If they weren't predictions, then they were prophecies, I said with a wry smile. Remember when you told me not to go to the mall? There was a lightning strike that nearly burned it down. Another time, when I planned to relax at home, you advised me to go out because it would be sunny. Reluctantly, I went out and found my house had been robbed. If I had stayed home, I would have had to confront the robber. I shivered at the memory. The robber was later caught with a knife, and the thought of what might have happened if I'd been home made me cringe. Despite her dismissive attitude, Grandma listened as I spoke with seriousness. I don't think I would have been prepared for my mom's illness if he hadn't told me, especially since she was my only family. My mom always said that you gave her peace of mind. You had told her that I would be blessed with something wonderful on a Christmas not far away. It brought her comfort to know that I would have a bright future before she left me. She shared this with me from her hospital bed. It was a ray of hope for her, and seeing her contented was a testament to her love for me. So when Dan proposed to me on Christmas Day, I thought it was just as you had predicted. I met him through a mutual friend. At first, he seemed like a humble and gentle guy. But once we got married, his true colors showed. He became an arrogant husband. Like the hot sauce incident, he got upset over trivial matters. He complained that the food was too cold and the salad was lukewarm, even though he had ignored the food for a long time, playing on his phone. It wasn't just about food. He criticized nearly everything I did. How I cleaned the apartment, washed the clothes. Nothing seemed to please him. It made me feel trapped and suffocated. I didn't want to go back home to him. I went to Grandma, feeling a sting in my nose as I spoke. Now, it's almost sunset. Don't you need to go back and cook dinner? Grandma said, urging me with a glance at the sky. Feeling softly rejected, I stood up slowly. You're going to be okay as long as you stand your ground, she assured me. Even though you'll face struggles, you will find happiness one day. You'll have a Christmas that will make you jump for joy. So just live honestly and stay true to yourself. God is watching. Her words softened my heavy heart. I turned around, contemplating her reassurance. Is it a prophecy? I asked. Let's see. I'm just an old woman, she replied with another ambiguous smile, leaving me puzzled. Maybe if I put in more effort, it might change. I decided it might be too early to judge her original prediction. But as I went about preparing dinner, ironing my shirt, and dealing with Dan's hostility, things only worsened. It had been less than a year since we married, and already he took it for granted to order me around. He was constantly grumpy and overbearing, never offering a kind word. One night, he stormed in, his anger palpable. Who do you think you are? He snapped. Why did you leave me waiting outside? I have to microwave my food now. God damn it, your laziness is infuriating. I sighed in frustration. I had a co-op meeting tonight. I'd even left a note on the table for you. Shut up. That's no excuse for lazy cooking, he yelled. What do you mean you didn't cut corners? I prepared the main course and sides as usual, but to him, if it wasn't freshly cooked, it was considered cutting corners. His logic was skewed and his demands were unreasonable. You should always come before anyone and anything, he insisted. I've been telling you, you're my wife and you must obey me. His incomprehensible demands left me stunned. He stood on his dignity, proclaiming, you have no family or relatives and can't live on your own. A scum like you should just shut up and worship me. If you can't, I'll divorce you. His smirk seemed to reveal that he was merely relieving his stress by making me submit. Anyway, give me a foot massage. I tried my best to restrain myself from snapping back. I knew that would only make him angrier. Besides, I had nowhere to go in the midst of the sleet at night. So reluctantly, I sat on the floor and began the massage. My life continued in this oppressive pattern until one day, while grocery shopping, I suddenly fainted from excruciating pain and had to be rushed to the hospital by ambulance. As the doctor explained my condition, I felt my mind go blank. This virus is transmitted through sexual intercourse, he said. I had your husband tested as well? Both of you are infected. You didn't realize it because there were no symptoms. He continued, unfortunately, you'll need surgery, and I'm very sorry to say this, but the chance of conceiving in the future seems extremely unlikely. Dan quickly followed the doctor, and I was left grappling with the devastating news. I couldn't have a baby. As I repeated the doctor's words to myself, my mind was slowly overtaken by darkness. Desperate for more information, I tried to follow the doctor and Dan with my unsteady legs. Wait, doctor, Dan, I called out, but I froze when I overheard their conversation. So, everyone out there needs to get tested? Dan asked. Exactly. They must be treated all at once, otherwise, it's pointless because it keeps coming back, the doctor replied. Would they know what the test is for? Of course, Dan said persistently. I listened in despair as the conversation unfolded. It turned out Dan had been seeing at least 3 girlfriends and was still involved with one of them. I looked at a picture of my mom in the empty room, whispering to it, I needed help, you know. Even though he's not a good husband now, he might change once we have a baby. I held on to Grandma's words like a charm. I would struggle, but eventually I would find happiness. I clung to the hope that things would get better. I had been wrong. Dan seemed to care only about his own health. He was meticulous about his condition and visited the hospital regularly, but he showed no concern for me. Having lost my parents, I yearned deeply for a family of my own, a husband, children, and a home filled with love. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched a picture of my mom in my hands. Mom, I sobbed, my voice breaking as I tried to stifle my cries. Suddenly, Dan burst into the room, his anger palpable. What are you doing wasting your time? You haven't even prepared dinner, he snapped. He threw the divorce papers down onto my head as I sat there, stunned. Here are the divorce papers. This is your punishment for neglecting your duties and disobeying me. His voice was harsh and his demeanor was deranged. You're so irritatingly depressing. I'm ready to divorce you at any time. It's no problem for me, but you're the one who will be in trouble. Instead of slacking off to your duty if you don't want a divorce. I'm not slacking off, I protested, but he was already cutting me off. Oh, and there's one more punishment, he said with a smirk. I'm not giving you living expenses this month. Consider this a chance for you to reflect and change your attitude. Know your place. If you disobey me, it'll be divorce. After he finished, he left the room, looking strangely refreshed. The word divorce echoed in my mind as I stared at his signature on the papers. I took a deep breath, wiping away my tears from the picture frame. Mom, I've decided, I said quietly, resolve hardening within me. I spoke softly to the picture of my smiling mother, asking her to watch over me. Then, I kept quiet and carried on with my life. For a while, Dan continued to treat me like a servant, venting his anger on me regularly. I argued back occasionally, but mostly I endured in silence. One day, as Dan began his usual tantrum, complaining about the lukewarm salad and cold stew, I sighed inwardly and resolved to follow through with my plan. You remember the deal, right? If I don't obey, it's divorce, I said. Right, you remember that at least, he sneered. If you don't want me to leave, reflect on your stupidity. He leaned back in his chair, smirking. You're a bit weak upstairs, aren't you? What? I replied, astonished. Did you just say that? He blinked in surprise at my response. What did you just say? Repeatedly saying divorce doesn't mean you're making a valid point, I said, unimpressed. Your lack of vocabulary is quite sad. What the heck? Let's just get a divorce, I said calmly. I'm perfectly fine with it. I'll be a stranger to you, just as you wish. Are you serious? He stammered, his mouth agape. I smiled and delivered my farewell, watching as his anger faded into confusion. I had already moved all my belongings out. If there's anything you don't need, just throw it away. Goodbye. I removed the apron I had bought when we got married, folding it neatly and placing it on the counter with the house keys on top. I gave him one last look and walked out of the house with my suitcase. What the heck is going on? His voice trailed after me, snapping him out of his daze. I ignored him, a sense of freedom washing over me. Yay, I'm free, I thought, heading towards my parents' house where I planned to live again. A year had passed since the divorce was finalized, yet Dan continued to contact me. His messages were relentless, pleading for apologies and offering to take me back. I had turned off notifications and ignored his non-stop texts, which were a new experience for me, given how little communication I had during our marriage. I decided to have one last face-to-face meeting with Dan at his parents' house. Why have you been ignoring me? Dan asked, trying to maintain a calm demeanor in front of his parents. I've been texting you, but you never replied. Oh, I turned off notifications from you, I said coolly. Why? Was it really that annoying? Yes, it was. Dan's face flushed with anger. So, what do you want to talk about? I responded with deliberate annoyance, watching as his frustration grew. What's with the attitude in front of my parents? What are you trying to prove? Dan's voice rose, but he quickly reined it in, glancing nervously at his parents. I'm sorry, he muttered, a rarity for him, especially during our marriage. I stifled a smile, surprised he knew how to apologize. I kept my tone steady and moved the conversation along. What exactly do you want to discuss with your ex-wife? You divorced me, remember? Dan looked puzzled, his anger momentarily replaced by confusion. Hold on, why are you acting so calm? Aren't you struggling after the divorce? How are you managing? He spoke as if he genuinely cared, yet he had never bothered to check on me, even though he knew where I was. If you want to get back together, I'm open to it, he said, his voice carrying a hint of hope. Doesn't that make you happy? Not at all, I replied, barely containing a laugh at his misplaced confidence. It doesn't make me happy, nor does it help me in any way. I'm doing well on my own. Your contribution of $500 a month wasn't enough to cover our needs. You're the one struggling without me. The expenses I used to cover are gone, and I'm much more comfortable being alone now. I shook my head, dismissing the idea. I don't see the point in getting back together after enjoying my newfound freedom. I feigned confusion as Dan's frustration became evident. What are you talking about? I was supposed to be a housewife, right? But why are we discussing finances? Dan shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsettled by the presence of his parents. Listen, Dan, stop acting like a child caught in the act. There's no need to put on a show for them. They know all about your secrets. Secrets? What are you talking about? Dan asked, his curiosity piqued. I signaled him to be quiet and prepared to reveal the truth. You're mistaken if you think I was just a housewife. Remember, I lived abroad because of my late father's work. I used the German. I learned to translate documents at home. The bookshelves were filled with materials and manuscripts, which I used to hide recording equipment. Wait, recording? Dan was stunned. His father presented the evidence, showing all the recordings of Dan's mistreatment. The videos laid bare his behavior, and Dan's parents were visibly distressed, apologizing to me and expressing their shame for raising him. Dan, caught off guard, looked like he might bolt, but his mother grabbed him and made him sit down again. She signaled to me, and I responded by pulling out the divorce papers. I pointed out the sections marked with red circles. You recognize these, don't you? No way, Dan stammered, clearly in shock. The red circles highlighted the witness signatures, names of people he knew well. Actually, there wasn't enough space for all the names. You've had more than 2 girlfriends, right? No more waiting, I continued. Before I could explain further, a resentful voice cut in. You never mentioned an STD. This means you brought it from somewhere else. Didn't you promise we'd get married? That's something only a bachelor would say. The argument escalated. You're not just a villain to us, but to all women. You're the #1 public enemy. You're finished. Surrounded by his former girlfriends, Dan crumbled to the floor as his parents looked on with exaggerated sighs. I had hired a private detective to investigate his girlfriends and had secretly contacted them. I also informed my ex-in-laws about everything. The result was chaos. Your game is up now, I declared. We're demanding compensation for the distress you caused. Dan worked for a company owned by a relative of his mother, so his payments were deducted from his salary to prevent him from escaping his obligations. Under strict supervision, he faced a long period of compensation payments. 6 years have passed since then. I was walking down the street on a cold day, Christmas songs playing everywhere, when a tree ornament caught my eye. My husband, his breath visible in the chill, looked back at me with a soft smile, his ears red from the cold. Our little girl, cheeks rosy, was nestled in his arms. I couldn't help but think about how Grandma's prediction came true. My current husband is surprisingly the brother of one of Dan's former girlfriends. After meeting him by chance and connecting over our shared experiences, he has been a source of comfort and joy. If not for what happened with Dan, I might never have met my current husband. Grandma's words about struggling but finding happiness have proven true. After we married, I found out I was pregnant, despite being told it was unlikely. I remember when I was rushed to the emergency room on Christmas Day and the doctor confirmed the pregnancy. My husband and I were overjoyed, jumping up and down, while the nurse tried to calm us down. It was a true Christmas miracle. As I snapped back to the present, my daughter clung to me in her fuzzy coat. Let's go home and have dinner. I prepared hot stew for this cold day. Sounds great. Yay, she cheered. Laughing, we held hands and walked home, the familiar Christmas song drifting in from somewhere nearby.